Okay, now let's move to our third business question. So, when was occupancy better, on weekdays or weekends? This is a useful business question because understanding when demand is stronger can support decisions around pricing, promotion, staffing, and capacity planning. But again, before calculating anything, we need to understand whether our current dataset actually contains the information required to answer the question. So step one is inspecting the dataset. Now, our current data frame already contains the occupancy percentage and check-in date. However, the check-in date alone does not directly tell us whether the particular date was a weekend or a weekday. Now, this information is available in our df-data frame. So, I first use head to quickly inspect the first three records. Here, we can see the four columns. Date gives us the actual calendar date, and YY gives us the month, year, week. No identifies the week. And most importantly for this question, date type classifies each date as either weekend or a weekday. So now we know where was the missing information coming from. So why do we need a merge? So df is equal to pd.merge bracket df comma df date left side check in date and right side date. Now we need to bring this day type information into our existing occupancy dataset. For that, I am using pd.merge. But notice, slightly different from our previous merge. The common information exists in both datasets, but the column names are different. In our main data frame, the column is called check-in date. Now, in the data frame, it's simply called date. That's why instead of writing on is equal to I'm using left on and right on. Left on is equal to check-in date tells Panda. Use the check-in date from my first data frame. And right on date tells Panda. Now let's match it against the date column from the second data frame. So if a hotel record has to check in the date of 10th May, so if a hotel record has to check in the date of 10th May, Pandas find out 10th May in the state table and brings its corresponding month, week number, and day type into the record. After the merging, I use H3 against perfect, I think works. And the step 4 is calculating weekdays or weekend occupancy. So we use the formula df.groupby bracket data type bracket occupancy percentage. Now comes the actual calculation. Let's break this line into pieces by piece. So let's break this line down piece by piece. First, we use df.groupby data type in parentheses. So I'm using pandas to give the records into group by based on today. Since day type contains two categories, pandas essentially creates two groups, one for weekdays and another for weekends. So this tells pandas that the metric I want to analyze with those two graphs is occupancy percentage. Then I mean dot mean parenthesis y mean, because we don't want to add occupancy percentage together. We want to know the average occupancy rate for weekdays compared with weekends. And finally, dot round to this simply rounds the calculated average to decimal places, making the output more clearer and easier to communicate. So the difference is approximately 21.46% point. That is a meaningful gap. Based on this dataset, the hotels are utilizing subsequently more of their available rooms capacity during weekends than during weekdays. From a business perspective, this could indicate stronger leisure or weekend demands. Now, management could use this insight as starting point for decisions such as optimizing weekends, pricing, while exporting promotions or corporate packages to improve weekday occupancy. However, the analysis identifies a pattern. It does not prove what caused it. Analysis it would be required before. Then the difference, customer attribution, the difference is so specific, and customer segment or business reasons. So let's quickly summarize what we covered. So business question was occupancy better than on weekends or weekdays. So a 6-string data set had occupancy check-in dates, but it didn't contain the weekday versus weekend classification. So first, we inspected the date dimension using head. Then we used people. Then we used pd.merge to connect the two data set. Now, first we inspected a data dimension using head. They were used pd.merge parenthesis to connect the two data sets. Because the joining columns had different names, we use left on is equal to check-in date and right on is equal to date. One day type was available. We used groupby to separate weekdays and weekends. So we have selected the occupancy percentage using mean parenthesis to calculate average occupancy and round 2 to make the result easier to work with or make the result easier to read. And the final insight are very clear. Weekday occupancy was 50.28%, while weekend occupancy was around 72.34%. So in this data set, weekend occupancy was significantly stronger than weekdays occupancy. So the key production concepts we covered here are head parenthesis comma pd.merge parenthesis left left on right on group by mean etc. So and more importantly, we use all of them together to convert raw data into actionable business insight. So yeah, I think we are done with the third question. We'll move on to the fourth question in the next video. I hope you learned something from this. Thank you so much for watching.